Welcome back to another episode of the Armchair Illini podcast. My name is Alex. I'm the owner of Armchair Illini. I once again am pinch hitting for Austin as he works on all of our football content. A lot of transfer portal news happening. So I'm doing a little bit of a basketball show. We got Alec Crouthamel from Rutgers on 3 here with us to kind of preview the Rutgers game versus Illinois at the State Farm Center in Champaign, Illinois on Thursday, January 8th. Before I bring Alec on, I do want to shout out our sponsor, Hamilton Walker Seafoods and Spirits. Illini fans, the Armchair Illini podcast is super, super fired up to team up with Hamilton Walker Seafood and Spirits. It is the best dining experience in all of Champaign-Urbana. We're talking about prime steaks, fresh seafood, and a great vibe after a big Illini win. Every week of the season, basketball season in particular, we're doing a $50 gift card giveaway on our social media. Since Rutgers is a home game, the one that will be associated with that game will be going up in a couple hours later today. So make sure you enter that. All you have to do is basically subscribe to our YouTube and share the post. But Hamilton Walkers, appreciate them and give them a visit if you're in the Champaign-Urbana area. So without further ado, I will bring on our guest, Alec Crouthamel. Alec, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing great today. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I know Rutgers and Illinois, they go way back. If you think about 2015, if you think about the Illini Rutgers matchups, and Rutgers has certainly evolved since then in more ways than one. But Alec, Rutgers is currently the worst team in Ken Palm. Sorry to start off on that note, first off. But just wanted to talk about Rutgers and how this season has gone, first off, for you.
Yeah, it's definitely not an unknown that Rutgers has struggled this year. So I'd say it's pretty well known. But on the way in the wake of losing the top five draft picks in the NBA draft, I'll say there needed to be some kind of reinfusion of talent, and unfortunately, over the offseason, that just kind of didn't really happen. The transfer portal didn't really yield a ton of big names. Money has been an issue for Rutgers for a while now in terms of NIL and things like that. They haven't really been able to compete at the highest level or a level that they need to in the Big Ten in order to get there. So the vibes at the start of the season were not very good, to say the least. It just didn't seem like this team had the talent level to really compete again towards the top of the Big Ten. And it's over the first 15 games, we have certainly seen that. They got off to a good start against some of their bye games, and they lost to Central Connecticut State, where they kind of just got like physically, run off the floor, which is never a good thing against a team in the worst Division One conference. And then the Players era, they get run off the floor by Tennessee. They get down big early on against Notre Dame, but they stage a comeback, but it falls just short. And then they beat a bad UNLV team to at least salvage a win out in Vegas. And then they have the gauntlet of all gauntlets to start the early window of the Big Ten, playing Purdue and Michigan. Those games went about as expected, and then they got again run off the floor by their in-state rival Seton Hall. So heading into Christmas, the vibes were probably as low as they could have possibly been. They beat Penn on a last second three by Tariq Francis, and that game was very, very close, too close, especially considering Penn was down their leading scorer and made a bunch of different errors that, the game really should not have been that close. And then they beat Delaware State, who is probably one of the 10 worst teams in the country, again, in a game that was ultimately way too close for a lot of it. And then Ohio State, they start out great. They get a 15-point lead in the first half, and then things just kind of fall apart from there. And then Oregon, I mean, that game last night, I'm still kind of reeling from it. There are things that I'm still not even sure what I saw last night. So it's been a lot of downs, not so many ups and downs, but more so downs. But I mean, coming off a win last night, I guess the vibes are better than they were over the last few weeks.
Yeah, definitely. I think Rutgers has always been, to me, kind of that gritty program that gets the most out of their guys. And I think in this NIL era and transfer portal era where money really talks, I think that's a tough model to really follow. And I think Pikel's had some trouble adjusting to that. Obviously, you get the two guys last year, but I think, to get the most out of your guys, I think at this point that kind of model is gone by the wayside. I do, before we kind of get into more Rutgers specific stuff, that call at the end of the Oregon game yesterday was kind of ridiculous to say the least. What did you think about that?
Yeah, so being in the arena last night, it was pretty crazy. So that game was coming down to the wire. Lino Mark, who was the guard that ended up getting whistled for the foul, just a few seconds before that call, he had missed a shot that would have put Rutgers up 4 with like 30 seconds left. Nate Biddle grabs the rebound and he just pokes it away from him. Like it was like a Jose Alvarado type steal that he made against Nate Biddle. So he got the ball back and then he got fouled. That's what put him at the free throw line. And Lino Mark is a true freshman. He has been very impressive with just his tenacity on both ends of the floor. He's very, very fast, and he gives it his all every time he's out there. So he has been definitely a welcome addition. And then he gets called for this phantom foul that was like, it was very obvious. Like the free throw went off the front iron. He beat Nate Biddle to the spot, which is inexcusable if you're Nate Biddle. But he beat him to the spot. One could even argue if there should have been a whistle, it should have been on Biddle for kind of reaching in. Like Lino Mark, if you look back, he had two arms wrapped around the ball, and Biddle has a hand in there. Steve Peichel was incredulous. I don't know. I don't really know why he didn't challenge. I'm still a little bit fuzzy on the challenging rules if you can challenge fouls or whatever. I think Dana Altman had already challenged a foul earlier in the game, so I think he might have been able to, but he just didn't. And then, of course, Wei Lin knocks down a three to tie the game. And I know Peacock went to a commercial break, but being in the arena, that was as loud and as like vitriolistic. That's not really a word, but there was just straight like venom towards the officials in that commercial break as it was going in between regulation and overtime. That was probably the loudest booze and maybe even the loudest I've heard that arena since Illinois came to Jersey Mike's Arena 4 years ago in that blackout game when Rutgers won four straight ranked games. It was unbelievable.
Yeah. Oh god, you just reminded me about that one game where Illinois could not make a bucket. Jersey Mike's Arena, if there's any place that you don't wanna have kind of bad blood with the refs, it's probably that one because 'cause I'm sure it got crazy loud. And you yourself, you were probably trying to figure out what was going on and things like that. And it's funny because it's after the weekend where Micah Shrewsbury tried to basically tackle a ref for a similar phantom foul. Obviously, I know, people explained it, but I thought that was pretty interesting. With the win over Oregon, I know Oregon's struggling as well. They were without Jackson Shelstead. Is there anything that this Rutgers team can kind of take away after gritting out a win where things obviously didn't go their way at the end? They could have easily kind of fallen apart, but in overtime they were able to pull it out. Is there any positive that you think that they can take from that game?
I think they might have found a path to success. Now, Oregon is a very different team, obviously without Jackson Shellstad. It seemed like Rutgers went to more of kind of like a small ball, guard heavy type of lineup down the stretch for a lot of the game. Lino Mark, one of those guys, Tariq Francis, another one of those guys, and Jermichael Davis, those three in particular. All three of those guys are pretty small guards, but they're very fast. And it just seemed like on the defensive side, they were able to speed up Oregon and really take them out of their rhythm. They looked really frustrated as that second half went on, as they started to lose that lead. And that's kind of I guess, against what Steve Peichel has traditionally done, where he wants to have a lot of size, a lot of length on defense. He wants to have that big man who can, swat away anything in existence. You think Miles Johnson, you think Cliff Amori. So that's kind of what he's built this Rutgers team into when it had its best success. You have the length at the wing spot and the guard spot, and you have a really strong rim protecting big man. Rutgers doesn't have that this year. Really, any of those things. I mean, they have plenty of wings, but the guards are on the smaller side, and the rim protection from the big man spot just hasn't really been there this year. Emmanuel Bole just has not developed into a solid Big Ten big man, despite being legit like 6'10", 280, like, one of the most built guys I've ever seen on a basketball court. So Bryce Dortch just kind of stepped into that role as like a kind of like a small he's basically a small ball center at that point. When he has stepped in, he's been solid on the defensive end. So I think they might have found some kind of formula where they can go on the smaller side, use their speed to their advantage, and just kind of like rotate. They're very switchable with that lineup. They also have a guy in Darren Buchanan at the wing spot, who can really wreak havoc because he is like he Steve Heichel describes him as built like a linebacker, and that's legit. He's like 6'7". I want to say like 250. Another guy who's just jacked. He switched on to Nate Biddle a few times and kind of held his own defensively. So I think they found some kind of path to success. Now it's a matter of can they do it against other Big Ten teams who aren't missing their star point guard, and other Big Ten teams who are bigger than Oregon is, despite having a guy like Nate Biddle. So I don't know how it's going to work out the rest of the schedule, but I think you have to at least try it because it's led them to a win already. You have to at least see if you can get something out of it.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting because I think Illinois itself has struggled a lot when teams kind of get up in them and disrupt their offense. Looking at their guard situation, obviously they have one of the best freshmen in the country in terms of Keaton Wagler, but we saw at least in the game versus Penn State, when he was out of the game, the offense looked like a complete mess. So I think that's definitely something that Rutgers can bring into Illinois. From your point of view, though, what do you think Rutgers has to do as a squad to throw Illinois off their kettle? Obviously, it's a tough game. It's on the road after a big, big emotional win. But what do you think they got to carry over to Champaign to have any kind of chance?
It's certainly not gonna be easy. I mean, Rutgers has never won at the State Farm Center, and a lot of times it really hasn't been all that close, so it's gonna be tough. The biggest key that I didn't even mention yet from last night's game, Rutgers got to the foul line and they made their free throws. Obviously, if you know Rutgers basketball, they've struggled from the free throw line for a lot of recent memory. They haven't really been a good free throw shooting team, but they went 30 of 34 last night. Um, and Tariq Francis himself, 10 of 11. This is his second performance. He also against Penn, he scored 35 points and had is something ridiculous, like 17 of 19 from the free throw line. So if they can continue to draw fouls and get to the line, because the half court offense definitely leaves a lot to be desired. So if they can continue to get to the free throw line, draw fouls, do what they can. Like this team isn't going to fool anyone for the Golden State Warriors with the way that they shoot the basketball. So if they can continue to get to the line, try to get to the rim, again, use that speed to their advantage. I thought Tariq Francis did something really interesting where, he plays very well off the bounce. He's got a really quick first step, so he's able to. He did about three different times and really frustrated Takai Simpkins before he ended up fouling out. Was just able to get into the mid range, stop on a dime, pump fake, get his guy in the air, and drew a foul. And it worked more than a few times. So if they can just kind of grit out as much as they can on offense, get to the line, try to hit some shots. I mean, again, the 3-point shooting, the mid range shooting leaves a lot to be desired. But if they can make a respectable amount of shots on offense, I think that's going to be a big key. And then on defense, yeah, kind of like you mentioned, they're going to have to take Illinois out of the rhythm. I think Illinois is going to have a size advantage. I mean, Oregon did not shoot. They shot a lot of threes. They shot 13 of 32 from the 3-point line and almost buried them last night. So they're going to have to A, stop the three ball, which they have struggled with this year, and B, they're going to have find some kind of strategy to defend the basket because all year long, Rutgers has struggled to defend the rim, and that is a hallmark of Steve Pikiell's defense. You funnel everything in towards the rim, so they have to figure out a way to defend the basket and eliminate some of the easy looks. I want to say Seton Hall had like 52 points in the paint or something ridiculous like that. Um, Oregon had 32 last night, so they have to figure out a way to defend the 3-point line and the rim. Obviously, the two most important parts of offensive basketball.
Yeah, I think you bring up some great points too, for our Illinois listeners. Obviously, for the keys to success is kind of pound the paint. 52 points from Seton Hall and then 30 plus from Oregon. Before we kind of get into kind of the macro stuff in terms of Rutgers, we talked a lot about the guards. I think Illinois, you can't fall in love with the three. Penn State, it was a little bit ugly, so I think you definitely got to get to the hole. But Illinois has a lot of size, as you mentioned. They got the Avicic twins. Zvonimir is obviously an elite rim protector. Tommy's struggling a little bit after coming back from an injury. They got David Mirkovic, who they play through a lot in the post. What's Rutgers front court look like, and what do they got to do to have success against a very, very skilled and very versatile front court?
Yeah, obviously, like I mentioned, Ogbole is the starting center. He just hasn't. He got to campus. I believe he was actually like he came in as a JUCO guy. He kind of got going late in the 23-24 season, and since then he hasn't really developed into that big man. Like I mentioned, he's absolutely jacked. I mean, he's not someone that I would want to mess with in any stretch. But he just hasn't really been able to be developed into that high end Big Ten caliber center. There have been way too many games this year where he just puts up zeros on the scoreboard. And then last night he got himself into foul trouble. He had 4 fouls, picked up 2 in 6 minutes, including a silly loose ball foul going after a rebound. So I mean, there are also some games where he's able to kind of dominate on the rebounding edge. Now, a lot of that's up against smaller teams, like in the UNLV game. They didn't really have that much of a big presence or center or anything like that. So he's able to have his best career game. So against bigger teams, he's just going to have to do anything that he can to hold his own in at the rim. His offense, I don't think his offense is going to come around at this point. I mean, it's been long enough. If it hasn't happened now, I don't think it will. So it's going to be all about defense and rebounding. And if you listen to any Steve Pikiell press conference, I think he says the word rebounding or rebound at least 10 times per press conference. It is like he has been at it the entire year. And Rutgers, I mean, they haven't been great at it, so there's a reason he keeps talking about it. And behind Ogbole, it's going to be Bryce Dortch most likely. Um, he's also not really going to be a guy that lights up the scoreboard. Like I mentioned, he's like a 6'9" small ball type center, but he has held his own on defense at times. He's fairly bouncy. He's made some solid impact plays, but the big man room in general just has not lived up to where it needs to be. They got a transfer by the name of Byfall, who might sound familiar to some. He was a former top 30 recruit. He has been he's been unplayable. I mean, there's a reason he's not coming into these games. There was a reason he came into this year with like, I don't know, maybe 80 total minutes played in his career at two different stops. I mean, it just he can't really do much at all on the floor when he's out there. So there's a reason he hasn't been playing, and I don't expect him to play against Illinois, especially against a formidable front court that the Illini have. And then behind him is a freshman by the name of Javante Ware. I don't think he'll play. Again, he didn't play last night. He's one of those developmental type guys that's still coming along. He's a bigger guy for sure. He provides some beef and some muscle, as Steve Pikiell likes to say, down low as a post guy, but I wouldn't anticipate him playing. So it's going to be up to Ogbole and Dortch, and I don't think that's a good matchup for Rutgers against Illinois.
Once again, we got Alec Crouthamel from Rutgers on three, previewing the Rutgers game. Great stuff so far. Alec, before we get to kind of the macro part of Rutgers, I do want to shout out our next sponsor, which is the Campus Inc. NIL store. The Armchair Illini podcast, we're very pumped to team up with Campus Inc.'s official NIL store. Some of the best officially licensed gear from your favorite Illini stars, including this Christmas sweater, which has been very comfortable to wear. Make sure you get all your merch, including Kylan Boswell, Luke Altmaier, while it's still on there. I know he's going to the NFL draft, but it's still all up on the Campus Inc. NIL store. And make sure you guys use code Armchair Illini. That's basically our Armchair Illini, all in caps to get 15% off of your order. And be sure to subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out a lot. Alec, so a couple years ago, I know Rutgers was one of those teams that's, they've kind of come into that second tier of the Big Ten teams. Steve Pikiell did a fabulous job. Obviously, Rutgers was always known as kind of the bottom dweller of the Big Ten. And then, you get Geo Baker, you get Ron Harper Jr., you kind of work your way up. And like I said earlier in the show, he's just seemed to maximize his guys and really, really get after it. But then obviously NIL era, all that, ever since all that started, it's kind of gone off the tracks a little bit. You look at a team like Seton Hall, in-state rival, very similar thing where, like you talked about, like the NIL resources maybe just aren't there, and you kind of have to work from behind in regards to that. But is there more to it than just, lack of resources and, not really having the talent to sustain in a growing conference like the Big Ten?
I think that's a big part of it. Another part of it is I just don't think he is a coach that is at his best in this modern era. When he's at his best, he's developing those guys that you mentioned over the years that they're in college. They stay at one program, they stay in, and they get developed and they get better under the same staff, continuity, things like that. I just don't think he's built for this modern era where it's a year by year thing. I mean, I'm sure he's trying. He's really trying to change things on the fly, adjust things like that with how he coaches. But he's at his best when you can have guys for 3 or 4 years and develop them, and then they're at their best as upperclassmen. And that's just not realistic in this day and age, especially when you don't, it's compounded when you don't have the resources to compete to keep those guys. I mean, you look at some of the guys that they've lost. Lathan Somerville went to Washington. Now he's really not playing all that much, but still, he could have been a developmental guy who showed some promise as a freshman. Even a couple of years ago, you look back to losing Cam Spencer and Paul Mulcahy to the transfer portal. That was a lot of, trying to maximize how much you can make in your final years of eligibility. Cliff Amori, same thing. Even though he was already really, really solid by the end of his Rutgers career, just having him for one more year with Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper could have provided so much more with his abilities as a rim protector. So it's the combination of the program just doesn't have the financial resources to really compete at a high level in the Big Ten. Now, part of that is also on the back of Steve Pikiell. I feel like he hasn't really adjusted to the NIL era as much. If you look at the football side, Greg Schiano, he hasn't had really the resources or the infrastructure in NIL to compete at that level either. The previous athletic director and administration were not overly keen to the idea of NIL, and it's had a rippling effect across the athletic department. With the new athletic director Kelly Zinn now in place, things are starting to get a lot better. They're bringing in a lot of money. They're bringing in a whole infrastructure. So those effects are still reverberating around the entire athletic department, and basketball is no different. So he hasn't had that infrastructure around him, and he hasn't done a great job himself of trying to really get that NIL infrastructure in there. Um, and he's never going to be mistaken for an offensive genius as well. And as modern basketball is going nowadays, everything's moving towards the analytical mind. You look at a Michigan or an Alabama shot chart, and then you look at a Rutgers shot chart. Like, it's night and day. That's the big difference offensively. So it's kind of a combination of all those things, and then you tack on the fact that Steve Pikiell's at his best when he can develop guys year over year. It's kind of like a perfect storm for why this program has been on the decline over the last few years in the modern day of college basketball.
Yeah, and I think it also highlights Brad Underwood and his ability to adjust, especially in the past few years. Year to year, he's just really able to create a roster and adjust around it, work his way around it. So I think that's something that goes really under the radar in terms of what Brad Underwood has done. Another thing I wanted to ask you about was Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. They're top 5 picks, like you said. They're on NBA teams, but it just never clicked. And like you said, Pikel is a guy that likes to develop. Um, Obviously, no one's ever going to say no to getting 2 top 5 NBA draft picks. But do you think that was a somewhat of a mistake for Pikel, or did he maybe drop the ball and not maximize it as much as he could have, or a little bit of both?
I think it's a little bit of both, but I would say it's more the latter than the former. I do think that last year's team had the potential to be really good, but the roster just wasn't really fleshed out properly. Kind of like I mentioned, the lack of resources. They lost Cliff Amori mostly because they couldn't afford to keep him. That's a guy that probably could have swung a few games Rutgers' way had he still been there because of just how good of a rim protector he is and how much Rutgers defense just struggled. There were too many portal additions that they just whiffed on, unfortunately. So I definitely think if Steve Pikiell would do it again, obviously he takes the 2 5 stars, the 2 top NBA draft picks, but the rest of around those two definitely was not maximized, and there was also some bad luck in there as well. Like Dylan Harper got sick Dylan Harper got sick for that Indiana game that Ace Bailey dropped 39. That was really the first time Ace Bailey got to run the show himself, and he absolutely dazzled out in Bloomington. And then he suffered an ankle sprain that kind of hampered him for a lot of that mid January to February stretch of the year when things just kind of went downhill. He made his triumphant return against Illinois last year, and they won that game. That was that the stretch that they had before the Illinois game and then the Illinois game. That was kind of like the what could have been stretch for Rutgers basketball season. So yeah, I think it was more so the fact that everything else around those two wasn't really fleshed out to its full potential where it should have been. I definitely think, and I think many other fans would agree, you would take those guys again in a heartbeat, but just kind of build the roster around them differently. If you can get more money, again, that's something that Steve Pikiell should bear some responsibility for as well. Not being able to raise the funds in order to really bring in the proper talent to surround this team. But yeah, I definitely think that if I'm in Steve Pikiell's shoes, I had the opportunity to get those guys, I would have done it again.
Yeah, definitely. Man, you just reminded me about last year's Illinois trip to Jersey Mike's. One of the more frustrating games of last year. Obviously, we had
Yeah,
some injuries too. I think some guys had some mono, things like that. So, man, you just brought me some chills because I remember I was very frustrated after that game.
I remember watching that game. I was thinking, like, why do they keep shooting threes? They're just not going to
Exactly.
go in. Rutgers has nothing on the interior. Just go to the basket. And Ivasic kept shooting threes. I'm like, just take him down in the yeah. That was an interesting game because
Yeah.
Illinois basically shot themselves out of it.
Yeah, and hopefully, and this has been kind of content on our website, just don't fall in love with the 3 that much. You got 2 7-footers, so don't fall in love with the 3, especially against Rutgers. It could be a trap game, at least in my opinion. Alec, great stuff. I really, really appreciate all your insight. It was very, very, great stuff, in terms of previewing this Illinois versus Rutgers game. Where can people find you on social media, and where can people find your work?
So again, I'm a writer for Rutgers on Three, the Night Report. If you just Google the Night Report, you'll find us there. You have all of our stuff. We are on a heater with the transfer portal right now. On the football side, it's going absolutely crazy. I cover football and basketball as well, so you can find our stuff there. We have our message boards as well, so that's always fun stuff. And then I'm also on Twitter at AlexCR12. So if you want to see my work on Twitter as well, you can follow me there too.
Yeah, the transfer portal is on an absolute heater. I feels like I go and get gas for my car. Next thing you know, there's 3 things that I have to cover. So
Yeah.
hang in there.
We're trying. Yeah, we have
Yeah,
our own podcast as well, the Night Report podcast, if you wanna check that out. We've been doing live shows with all the transfer portal news. We've been doing, like, 1 or 2 a day for the past, I wanna say, like, 5 days, so we are certainly keeping busy.
yeah, and make sure all our listeners, make sure you guys check out the description to get Alex work. If you guys are interested in learning more about Rutgers, head their way because these guys are awesome. Alex, thanks again, my man. We'll talk to you soon. And to all of our listeners, make sure you guys are subscribed and following the show on Spotify and YouTube.